Hey you, do you need a formal diagnosis to get help with dyslexia? This is one of the questions I hear most often from parents who've been waiting for months for an appointment, from adults who have spent decades wondering whether that's what they should have got, or from teachers who suspect something is wrong but they don't know what to do next. So today I want to answer it as clearly as I possibly can. And I'm going to answer it from two angles. Firstly, as a specialist dyslexia consultant who's worked with many people, and also as a person myself who's only recently discovered my own learning challenges and dyspraxia during my professional training. So stay with me because this one is personal. What does a diagnosis actually involve? So let me walk you through what actually happens when you go looking for a formal dyslexia assessment in New Zealand. There are a few different pathways. So you can go to a registered educational psychologist. That is the most comprehensive option, and it can also pick up other things like ADHD or anxiety at the same time. However, it comes at a cost, and that sits typically somewhere between $1,500 and $1,800. Sometimes it may be more. SPELD New Zealand also has trained assessors who can carry out assessments at a lower cost. This is usually somewhere between $700 and $1,000. There are other specialist assessors who are trained to work in this area too. So here are a few things that might surprise you though. Schools cannot give your child a formal dyslexia diagnosis. That has to happen outside the school system, which means families usually have to find and fund that support themselves. And that can be a very real barrier for a lot of people. So here's something that often stays with me though. So even after you go through that whole assessment process, you very often end up with a detailed, long and a comprehensive report. So I've read many of them as a professional, and they're quite genuinely hard to understand. The question I always find myself asking is this, is what actually happens next when you've got that report? So who benefits from a formal diagnosis? A diagnosis can be genuinely important for some people. So that moment of, oh, so that is what it is, can bring enormous relief to some people. Years of confusion suddenly have a name, and that does matter for people. In secondary schools, a formal diagnosis is often required before additional support is provided. A reader-writer is one of the most common forms of that support, and it's a magnificent resource for those people who get that. These reader-writers are dedicated and skilled people who provide that essential help for students sitting assessments and exams. However, I want to be honest about something because I think this is really important. A reader-writer can read the questions to you, and they can write the words that you give them. What they cannot do is see inside your brain. So for a picture thinker whose mind is swirling with vivid images, action-packed ideas, and richly coloured recollections, so translating all of that into the words in the moment is one of the hardest parts of the whole process. The reader-writer is sitting right there, and they have absolutely no access to what's happening inside that magnificent mind. So the support is real and valuable. However, it also has its limits. So, what do you do with the diagnosis or the label once you have it? This is the question that a lot of people ask because a diagnosis is a starting point. It's not a solution, and too often, what follows a diagnosis is more of the same thing that was not working in the first place. More repetition, more drills, more phonics, more slow and painful progress that feels like a chore and slowly sucks all the joy out of reading. Or sometimes it may suck all the joy out of learning altogether. So I have seen children who were phonetically spelling words correctly, but reading them back is something completely different. I have seen students over syllabifying words the way one young woman I worked with gave the word beautiful 7 syllables. Beautiful. She had been given a system that she was applying it faithfully, but it was not serving her because the system was built for a different kind of learner. So, do you actually need a diagnosis? Well, here's my honest answer. A diagnosis can open doors and it can provide access to support, accommodations, and resources that make a real difference. For secondary school students in particular, this can be an essential step. However, a diagnosis does not tell you how to learn. It does not show you what your brain actually needs, and it does not give you the tools to move forward with confidence. I know this not just as a professional, but as a person. I was one of those kids who just had to work twice as hard, study twice as long, barely pass. My mind would go blank in every test, no matter how much I had prepared or repeated. Writing was just hard. So many drafts, and in the end, I would just tell myself that would do, like I was always settling for second best. And the clumsiness, oh my goodness, the clumsiness. I was always tripping over something, even when there was nothing to trip over. I would find it anywhere. Anyway, all of this quietly chipped away at how I felt about myself, never quite measuring up and never quite good enough. It was only when I went through the Davis program as part of my own training that I finally understood. Those weren't character flaws, they were traits of dyslexia and dyspraxia. I was not dumb, I was not clumsy, I just didn't have the right tools yet. What actually helps? Well, for me, the Davis method works with the way a picture thinker's brain actually processes the world. It doesn't fight against it. It does not ask a visual spatial thinker to become something they are not. Once I had those tools, I found focus, stability, calm, and real self-regulation. I became more coordinated, more aware of my own space in the world. I went on to study dyslexia and neurodiversity in depth because it became my life's work. A whole new world then absolutely opened up for me, which was life-changing. And I see this time and time again with my clients. Not slow, painful progress, real change. And that's the kind that lasts. So whether you have a diagnosis or not, whether you are a parent watching your child struggle or an adult who has spent years wondering, you do not have to keep waiting for someone to hand you a report and hope for the best. I also like to invite you to come along to my online workshop, From Confusion to Clarity, helping learning finally make sense. I will walk you through what is actually happening, why traditional approaches often fall short, and what genuinely does work. My first one's Wednesday 6th of May at 4 p.m. New Zealand time, which is designed for educators and professionals. My next one is Wednesday the 20th of May at 7:30 p.m. New Zealand time, and that one is designed for parents. $39 plus GST, live, online. Registration details are in the description. And please, if you found this video useful, share it with someone who needs to hear this. You never know whose life you might change. Please like and subscribe it too, and I'd love to know your comments. See you in the next video.